Money printer go brrr. So what is happening in the United Kingdom with the Bank of England and the British government or the United Kingdom government may be a sign of things to come in many other governments. So we have lots of governments now in a currency war, in a race to debase, creating hundreds of billions or trillions of their own currency units to buy their own government bonds, to devalue their own currency against the dollar. However, what makes what is happening in the United Kingdom different is that the United Kingdom has decided, despite the UK government not having lots of cash on their balance sheet, the government not having lots of cash and reserves or savings, they have decided to extend 80% wage subsidies as England goes back into lockdown. This article is from November 1st. Britain's government will extend by a month its costly global pandemic wage subsidies to ensure workers who are temporarily laid off receive 80% of their pay. But where is that currency coming from? It is coming out of thin air through modern monetary theory, which is not modern. Ludwig von Mises, and I have articles, I'll put this below the video in the information and description section, was writing about this 70 years ago. And there's been Austrian School of Economics articles countering this. It was called Chartalism. So modern monetary theory is actually not new at all. And it is meant to fight deflation, part of stagflate tax lie, and it's an 80% wage subsidy. So you have workers in the United Kingdom getting paid 80% of their wages to not produce anything. Okay, they're not working. They're not producing anything. So they're just getting paid to maybe order in food or start their OnlyFans page or whatever. And there is not new goods and services being produced in the economy, and this is leading us down stagflate tax lie towards the end, and the end is the road to serfdom. The end of the road is even worse serfdom, basically slavery by the global elites. Britain introduced the 80% wage subsidy scheme in March, and it has been due to expire on Saturday, so this was a couple weeks ago, to be replaced with a more targeted and less generous support. The scheme supported 8.9 million jobs at its peak and has been forecast to cost around £52 billion, or $67.28 billion, over its 8-month lifespan. The British government, the UK government, ran a $286 billion deficit in only 7 months. So £214.9 billion or $286 billion deficit in the first 7 months of the fiscal year, underscoring the tough choices facing Chancellor Rishi Sunak as he prepares for a major announcement on spending next week. The Office for National Statistics, and the Office for National Statistics is the only government agency I am aware of that is actually tracking shrinkflation. So the official inflation rate, according to the United Kingdom, the official inflation rate is barely 1%, I believe, with their consumer price index. But the Office of National Statistics is releasing an annual shrinkflation report for the last, I think, 5 or 6 years. And that shrinkflation report is saying many food items are shrinking in portion size by 6 to 18% per year. So which one do you think is the reality? Do you think it's the official government consumer price index? Or do you think it's the shrinkflation where the quality of the food items is also being substituted? So the higher quality, there's less meat in many items. Cocoa, the quality cocoa in candy bars is being reduced. The portion size is being drastically reduced versus the fake government economic data that is being spat out. Showed the deficit in October alone totaled £22.3 billion, leaving Britain on course for a shortfall approaching £400 billion for 2020 through 2021 as a whole, and debt above 100% of GDP for the first time since the early 1960s. And they're also increasing more in military. They initially started doing supply-side economics, but that wasn't enough. They have to fight deflation. They have to fight deflation because we all know, and I'm being sarcastic here, that deflation is bad. If you don't have any debt, deflation is not bad. If you have an online business, you don't have any debt, you have savings, deflation is not bad. Inflation is good for over-indebted governments. Inflation is good for the debtor. Deflation is very bad for people that have too much debt. 100% of GDP for the first time since the early 1960s. There was better news on retail sales, rose for 6 straight months because they're just handing people checks. Some people, they don't even have to work and they're getting a check, 80%. And the economy is not producing anything. There's going to be way more currency units chasing fewer goods and services. Or the United Kingdom is going to have to import more. and those imports are going to get more expensive too. The scale of the damage inflicted by the pandemic will be laid bare November 25th when Sunak unveils the cash each department will get to fund public services and investments in the coming year. The spending reviews plans will be underpinned by new forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility, which is expected to echo the Bank of England and private sector analysts by predicting the sharpest economic contraction since the Great Frost of 1709 and only a gradual recovery to pre-pandemic levels. At almost a fifth of the economy, the budget deficit the government is running, is said to be the largest in British peacetime. A staggering deterioration from March when the OBR was expecting just £55 billion, or around 2.5% of GDP. Let me go back to the MMT article. Okay, the scheme, firms will have to contribute 5% of the employment cost for workers covered by the extension, the finance ministry said. It also, but that's nowhere near enough. The Bank of England is creating hundreds of billions, probably. So it says 67 billion now, but it's going to end up being more than that because the central government is also running budget deficits too. So they're handing out MMT checks and the government is also running budget deficits. Or they're going to sell the bonds. Maybe the banks there, the large British banks, will be able to sell the bonds. Firms will have to contribute 5% of the employment cost for workers covered by the extension, the finance ministry said. It also said any mortgage payment holiday scheme would be extended for households and business premises, which are required to close because of the pandemic restrictions, would get grants of up to £3,000 a month. Mortgage borrowers impacted by the pandemic and who have not yet had a payment break will be entitled to a 6-month holiday, while those that have already started a payment holiday will be able to top up to 6 months. The ministry said, quote, "I've always said they will do whatever it takes as the situation evolves, to fight deflation, stagflate, tax lie." And now the Republicans, even here in the United States, the Republicans have even folded. They're on board. They want checks handed out to Americans rather than to the states. So the Republicans, who for years now were saying they wouldn't be on board with MMT, look how quickly they folded, and now they're on board. They want those checks handed out, except for maybe Mitch McConnell and some of those other rhino Republicans and neocons. They probably want more military spending unless they're making deals with the Democrats to protect themselves in the Great Reset. Now, as restrictions get tougher, we're taking steps to provide further financial support to protect jobs and businesses. Yet they are printing money. They are it's not really money, it's currency. They are creating currency units out of thin air. Money printer goes boom. So it went very quickly to the narrative is they will fight deflation any way possible, stagflate, tax lie, and one of the best ways to fight deflation and to stagflate, tax lie is to just create currency units out of thin air and hand people checks, even though they're not actually producing anything. The long-term ramifications for this, the unintended consequences, the distortions in the economy of people not producing, not earning any, not going to work and working hard and earning a check is going to be very, very difficult. Also, if you're dependent on a government check, are you going to criticize the government? Are you going to speak out? Especially if your food bill's on the line, your healthcare bill, feeding your family. So more people are just going to keep their mouth shut. Otherwise, they're not going to get their check. Otherwise, their bank account's going to be turned off. Their credit card's going to be turned off. This is down a very dangerous slope here. And this is heading, all these governments are heading along the path of the Chinese Communist Party, unfortunately, and the social credit score system. Because if you open your mouth and you criticize the government and you say something that a politician or a bureaucrat or a corporate CEO or a bankster or someone running these social justice warrior social media departments doesn't like, they could shut you off. They could hurt you financially, or they can just shut off your credit cards or your bank accounts. They could give you a social credit score penalty. This is very, very bad for anyone who likes smaller government and freedom. Very dangerous precedent, because if you are reliant on government for your 80% of your salary check just for your food bill, this is serfdom here, because if you don't get that check, you don't get food. And do you think then that people are going to bite the hand that feeds them? Are they really going to speak out and criticize the government if they don't like what their government's doing? So, unfortunately, we are headed down a very, very bad path. F.A. Hayek was warning about this. He wrote about this in The Road to Serfdom. Well, we are almost at the end of the road, unfortunately. And the elites are calling this the Great Reset. I'm calling this the end of the road to serfdom. We are almost all the way there.